several new faces. So we have our departmental advisory board joining us today. And
yes. So I'm going to introduce you so you can stand up. We have Wanda Lawson, who works with Stanford, which is a soil and water consulting type person. We have Eric DeWalt, who owns his own consulting, what's it called?
Bridgewater.
And we have Doug Minear, who works for ECSI, which is essentially a soil and water consulting firm too.
A lot of mining engineering.
Mining.
Past and, yeah. So,
And then we have Mary Deli Loisel, and you work for the state. What's your title?
I'm environmental engineer.
Environmental. And then we have Pamela Cadian, and she's bioprocessing. And work for, what's the name of your company now?
I work for some company called Pyramidal Pharma Solutions. We're a pharmaceutical manufacturing company, and we make a lot of cancer drugs and injectable drugs. So that when you see a vial, you stick the needle in, we make those.
And then in the back row, we have Blair Lauer, who works for Cummins. Oh, I see. It's the machinery. And Richard Schultz, who works with Linville. So I think all but Richard. Richard, you were never in this classroom. Were you in the other building?
I was in the old building. They were building this building whenever.
Oh, okay. So the other people are having flashbacks because they had a lot of classes in this room. We've added a whiteboard. Do you see our whiteboard? Yeah, high tech. Okay, but we appreciate them being here today, and feel free to talk to them at lunch. You know who they are.
all right, so we're not going to start this without a trivia question. So, which animal has the longest tongue relative to its size?
Any of you?
No.
Giraffe.
No.
Oh.
Chameleon.
Yes.
Chameleon.
Who got that? All right.
Give you a point.
I'll tell you, I'm keeping track. Yeah, so a chameleon's body is about 5 to 6 inches long, and it can reach an insect about 10 inches away.
Whoa.
All right. So, is that okay?
Yeah.
So we're here. So today, Dr. Notes and I will be talking a little bit about a workshop that we both attended over the summer. Karen was actually there as well, but we saw a workshop given by Dr. Sandra McGuire, and she does a lot of work with academic success, so helping students succeed in their courses. And so a lot of this presentation that we're going to give today is based off of the presentation that she gave, as well as her book that goes by the same title, Teaching Students How to Learn. So strategies that you can incorporate into any course to help students.
So we're doing it from both the student and the instructor perspective. So if you're a student, you'll hear some things that could help you, but the instructors we have some strategies for those people too. And you know, a lot of you who are currently students are going to be instructors.
So sort of the buzzword, the big word from this book is metacognition. So what is metacognition? Well, it's basically the ability to think about your thinking. So as we're going through classes, you know, we're all having to think and problem solve, but do we ever take a step back to reflect on how we go about learning, on how we go about working these problems, and how we think and what processes work best for us? So it's basically just being consciously aware of yourself as a problem solver and knowing how to ask those questions. Am I understanding the material, or am I just simply trying to memorize it? And why haven't students developed these skills? Well, can't really see it. It wasn't really necessary in high school. And we're seeing a lot of students come in now without the skills that they need to succeed in college level classes. And over the next couple of slides, I'll show you some of the data that backs that up. So this was a survey done over the years 2010-2014 by UCLA, the Higher Education Research Institute there. And they asked students over those years, they asked college freshmen the number of hours they spent each week studying as high school seniors. Okay, and you can see this top line here, it's hovering around the 60% mark, but about 60% of students spent less than 6 hours a week as a high school senior studying.
Or doing homework.
Or doing homework. And what this bottom line says, it's a little light, but it hovers around the 50% mark. 50% of them earned 8s. Okay, so about 60% of students are spending less than 6 hours a week studying. 50% are earning 8s.
How many people think that was true of them in high school?
Yeah, it was definitely my opinion.
I think days.
Oh. How many hours did you spend studying?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then another sort of shocking point from this is in 2013, where we're slightly above 50%, or slightly below 60%, spending that 6 hours a week or less, roughly 97% of students earned an A or a B. So, you know, that's a big amount of lack of preparation, really, but they're earning these great grades. And even the organizations that do the SAT, the ACT exams that students take for entering college, they have these concerns as well. So they're seeing that fewer than half of all SAT test takers from 2013 are graduating high school prepared for college level work. And then same thing from the ACT people, about 31% of students are still unready for math, English, reading. Yeah.
Just to clarify, is that based on their SAT score?
I don't know how they came up with how they would gauge whether or not they were ready for.
I'm assuming it's based on their scores.
Okay. So I guess they're having lower, the average of the scores are lower now for SAT.
Yes.
SAT, ACT scores than they used to be.
But the students are getting better grades in high school. So they don't know they're not prepared.
And then fewer than a fifth of this 31% actually go on to complete college within 6 years.
And that's definitely true in Kentucky. We have an abysmal completion rate.
Say that again, please.
So the ACT people found that about 30% of the students are unready for college level. Fewer than a fifth of that chunk of people even go on to finish college within 6 years.
Is that counting technical colleges too, or just universities?
No, I think it's just 4 years.
So what can we do as faculty to sort of help students make that transition? So we're here to help them learn, right? That's one of our big goals. And what we need to help students do is identify what practices they need to put in place in order to be successful. What they're doing what they're used to. So their current behavior, you know, that 6 hours a week of homework is getting them the grades that they want in high school. So that's what they're going to come in and do here. But that's not what's going to get them the grades that they desire at the college level. So how do we help shift that into their behavior into productive behavior so that they get those grades that they're used to getting? So I have a couple of questions here. What I want you to do is think about it for a few seconds, discuss it with your neighbor, and then we'll talk about it. So what is the difference, if any, between studying and learning? Go ahead and discuss with your neighbor. Alright, so does anyone want to share what their answers are? Or what they think the difference between studying and learning is?
I've got an analogy.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, my wife was taking calculus. She was a couple years behind me, and it was the non-engineering calculus. and I was helping her, and she had a test, and I was said, okay, we start here, and you go here, here. She said, no. I don't want to know how to do it, I just want to be able to pass the test. So well, you got to start here to do the calculus. No, that's not what we do. So I think that's the difference. She wasn't interested in learning.
Yeah.
Learning is being able to apply it or retell it. Studying is just trying to cram it in to be able to get it back out for a test.
Yeah.
Or memory.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got a second question for you. So I'm going to give you two tasks, and I want to know which one you would work harder for. Okay. So would you work harder to make an A on a test, or would you work harder to teach the material to the class?
Teach the material.
Yeah. Teach the materials to the class. Yeah, and a lot of people tend to say that. There are still a lot of people who say they would work harder to make that A, but
Yeah, but they've never taught.
but they've never.
They never stood up there and go,
You don't want to stand in front of a room and not.
Exactly. So these are. Sorry about this, guys. So these are.
it's our projector.
It is. So these were some student answers to the study versus learning question. So studying equals memorizing, learning equals understanding and applying. So basically what Wanda was saying. Studying is what I do the night before an exam to make an A. Learning is what I do if I would need to use that material later on.
Yeah, and for some reason, the students don't make that connection, that they're gonna need to use that material later on.
To be fair, it depends on the class.
It does, and it depends on the student.
My cultural anthropology class has not been overly useful.
Okay.
Yet.
Yeah.
I think this was my favorite quote. So, studying is like being force-fed a plate of gruel. Learning is like being sat in front of a gourmet table where you get to choose the delicacies you want to eat. Okay. So, students do understand that there is a difference between studying and learning. They just haven't quite figured out how to get into that learning mode and stay in that learning mode. So, the question I have is, do you want to play a gruel, or do you want to choose what you get to?
You're gonna make our lunch look pretty bad when
I
you're showing us that.
And I was gonna say, I did want to, we have a lunch coming up, so.
Well, and to some degree, sometimes we have to learn what we don't like
Yes.
in order to avoid what we don't like, or to
Yes.
prepare.
And it's hard to stay motivated too if you are trying, if you don't get what you don't like, and keep going. So, if there's any one single thing that a student could do right now, if they were only going to implement one type of strategy, it would be, and especially for STEM students, would be homework problem solving. So I think they have to look at how they go about solving homework problems differently than what they do now. So what's the current or the typical student reaction to homework?
You don't draw a diagram.
Wait till the night before,
Just
maybe
keep it
even a
on
couple
the-
hours before.
Google it.
Try and get it done as quickly as possible. So one of the things that you can do is actually go through this systematic process. So study the information before you sit down to do the homework problems. So make sure you have a good grasp of the knowledge that is being practiced in those problems. Work examples that are in the book, but don't peek at the solution. So get the problem, work it through until you get an answer. Okay? Check to see if the answer is correct. If it's correct, great. Good for you. But if it's not correct, go ahead and cover it up and keep working it until you get that answer. And if you get to an answer and it's still not that answer, then you can look at and see how the problem has worked. And then work the homework problems as if you are taking a test. Because that's when it really matters, right? So I have a little activity for us to do. Hopefully you can see it on here. So I'm going to throw up a slide here, and I'm going to give you 45 seconds. And what I want you to do is to count the number of vowels that you see on the slide. Okay? Ready?
Yeah.
What was that?
Does Y count?
Y does not count. Ready? Go. All right, write your number down. How many words or phrases do you remember?
Remember after.
One?
Oh, thanks,
She comes with you.
Alright, so I'm kind of hearing it all over the place here. Okay? Now, let's look at the words again. Okay? So, and the question I have is, what are they arranged according to?
Alphabetical.
Are they?
No.
Oh,
Oh, it's alternating. Oh,
No?
No?
It was.
Does anyone see an underline? Say that again?
It's colors, red, orange, yellow, green.
Yeah. Someone's good at spotting patterns. So yeah, that's exactly how they're arranged, according to the colors of the rainbow. So if you know that the mnemonic Wojciech Biv, the colors of the rainbow, that's how they're. Okay, so now I'll give you a few more seconds. Think about the list. Now you need to remember.
a lot more.
A lot more.
You know the patterns.
I know all
Yeah.
that.
Now that you know the pattern, you have something that
If you want to
you can sort of follow, right? So it makes it a little bit easier to make those connections. What were the two major differences between the first and second attempt?
Well, the second attempt you told us what we were looking for.
Yeah.
The second is
And we
visual.
So the second time we knew what the task was, right? So the first time I kind of threw you off just a little bit, asking you for something because, you know, what we're asking for as instructors isn't necessarily what the student thinks we should be asking, right? So now we know what the task is. What about the second
The
time?
pattern.
What
Pattern?
The pattern? Yeah, we knew how it was organized, so we knew what patterns to look for.
We'd already seen it too, we had
Right.
the repetition.
So we had already previewed the material once, so we kind of had an idea of what was there. And that's one of the strategies we're going to talk about later. But now getting back to that learning, picture's not too
Aww, it's a cute picture.
So what do we know about learning? So we know it's a very active activity, right? So active learning is more lasting than passive learning. You have to actually engage with the material to learn it. And just as importantly is thinking about how we think. And that's that metacognition component of it. So the other part is the level at which learning occurs is very important. Has anyone ever heard of Bloom's taxonomy? Probably a few people. Yeah. So this is, it's a hierarchy of learning, basically. So it's often depicted as a pyramid, and remembering is down here at the bottom. That sort of forms the foundation of all learning. Because at some point you just have to, learn and regurgitate some information, right? And as you move up the different levels, you get into more sophisticated interactions with the material, and we really want to see students moving up towards that top of the pyramid, and hopefully that's what they're doing as they're maturing through their education. But so this was another question that was posed to students. So at what level of Bloom's did you have to operate to make A's and B's in high school? And we sort of flipped the order here. So remembering was that base, and we go into the higher levels here. So what do you think they said?
2, maybe 3.
1, 2, 3, yeah, and that's exactly right. So over 80% said to get A's and B's in high school, I only had to remember, understand, and apply information. And then they were asked, at what level do you need to operate in college to get A's and B's? 4, 5, 6. 4. Yeah. More than 70% said that they had to operate at analyze, evaluate, and grade. So how do we get students to that level? How do we teach them to be more engaged and more responsible for their own learning. This is just one final example before I turn it over. This was some exam scores for a general chemistry class. Looking at 3 different years, they had 3 different exams. In fall 2009, fall 2010, they roughly stayed constant across the semester, across the 3 exams, right below that 70% mark. In fall 2011, the first exam was right about at the same point, but you can see it increased quite a bit after exam 2 and 3. So what was the difference?
Which one?
Well, the difference was in 2011, after that first exam, they were given a 50-minute intervention of these learning strategies, right? So, and it was important that it was after this first exam because before going into that exam, they wouldn't have heard the message. They would have said, I know how to study, I know what I'm doing, I've always made good grades before. They get that exam back. Now they're finally ready to listen, oh, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. So you can see at this point, they've been introduced to these skills and their performance increased quite a bit compared to the 2 previous years. So I think that's enough data to back up why we think this is important. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lewis, and she's going to talk more about the strategies.
Thank you. You can sit in my seat. Okay. So one thing Dr. McGuire said is that she has learned over the years not to say study skills, but to say metacognitive learning strategies. And it's a branding, she realizes that, but students' eyes glaze over when you say study skills because they think they know how to study. But when you mention metacognition, then they're like, this might be something new, this might work. So they pay attention. So this is metacognition. And it's also such a good skill because they can monitor their own learning and we can get them to take responsibility for their own learning. These 4 are essentially the metacognition that Alicia talked about. Goal setting for your study period, monitoring. This is the metacognition. You're monitoring, you're assessing, and then you're checking to make sure you know what you've learned, if you're using metacognition. Okay, so you instructors in the room, have you ever heard this? Students say, I studied, but I blanked out during the exam. I thought I knew it, but I didn't. It made perfect sense on the board during lecture, but then when I did it during the exam, it didn't. Or, this is my favorite because I heard this all the time. There were not examples of problems like the ones on the test. We didn't go over anything like that in class. And what do you suppose the difference is on number 2? The instructor, I'm sure, thinks they went over that. But the problems that the students say they've never seen one before are likely further up on Bloom's taxonomy. So they can do their problem for 1, 2, 3, but we're asking for number 4 or 5. And they're like, that's a completely different problem. It's not, but they haven't learned how to move up that Bloom's taxonomy yet. So very often we ask them to analyze, evaluate, and create. But they don't know how to prepare for that type of exam. So if you're a student, or if you're an instructor, you know, how do you move yourself up on Bloom's taxonomy? So this is the student's dilemma. Well, Dr. McGuire has come up with the study cycle, and essentially it's a system to learn things efficiently. So we're going to start out by previewing what you read before you go to class, and she's saying 5 to 10 minutes. You know, this is just, let's look, and then you're going to go to class. That's a very important one. Not everybody believes. Dr. McGuire is a strong advocate of taking notes because you stay more engaged during the class. And I know students want the PowerPoint notes, and those are helpful, but that's not everything, right? And so you've got to write down the other stuff. Take notes, ask questions, and then review. This is another quick thing. So after class, you just go through your notes and you review, and you say, oh, I don't understand this part. So then the next day you can go in and ask your professor, what did you mean when you said this? And so you keep current, understanding what's going on. And then when you study, there's a focused study session. There's a specific way that she gives us to study. And then at the end of the study session, you're checking things. You're seeing if you know how to do what you're trying to learn how to do. So, a brief digression, textbooks. A lot of faculty are thinking they're doing their students a favor by not requiring a textbook. But here's an example. So what do you see? What word is this?
Net.
Net?
Not.
Nut? Okay. If you know something very well, you fill in the missing piece, right? And, you know, so you're not sure whether it's net, not, or nut, but when you're studying, you can figure it out in context, right? So you can fill in large chunks, and, you know, that's obvious from the texting language, right? Anybody not know what IMHO is? I had to text my daughter to say, what does IMHO mean? In my humble opinion. Right? Is that right, students? Did I get that? Okay, but what if we use different words for things? So if you were from a culture that didn't have nuts, nets, or knots, you wouldn't know how to fill in the middle letter, right? That is the experience of students who try to use lecture notes to learn the material. Because they don't know the material. And they're coming in, and the instructors know the material, so they think it is all in the notes. It's in the notes. And we can't see, as instructors, we can't see what's not there. And that's why the students need textbooks, because the textbooks fill in those missing chunks.
And it gives them opportunity to learn different ways with different sensories.
Yes, because a textbook will usually explain things in a couple different ways, and then you're...
You have different questions too. Not all the students come with the same questions. They
Right.
see things in different ways.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, and then if you, so you require a textbook. Don't assume that they know how to use the textbook. So Dr. McGuire tells a story of, so Dr. McGuire is a professor emeriti from LSU, and she used to teach general chemistry. So she spent her whole career teaching general chemistry. And she developed these things because, you know, general chemistry students usually want to get A's. They're med students, they're engineering students, they want to get A's, and they're used to getting A's, and then they fail their first test. And so she wanted a way to help them. So that's how she developed all this. So she was helping a general chemistry student after the first exam who didn't do very well. And the student came into her office, and she was all prepared to get help. She had her textbook, her notebook, she had her calculator, and so Dr. McGuire said, okay, what concept are you having trouble with? The student said, well, I don't understand entropy. And she said, okay, what's the definition of entropy? And the student's like, I don't know. And she said, okay, you don't know. How could you find out? And the student started looking around the office, looking at the posters, looking at the bookshelf. She's like, I don't know. And so Dr. McGuire, this was at LSU, she said, what if I told you that if you don't tell me the definition in 5 minutes, you have to give me all the rest of your football tickets? And the student said, I guess I'm not going to any more football games. And Dr. McGuire's like, no, you know that you know the answer. There is something in this room that will tell you the answer. And she's like, the textbook? Yes, the textbook. And then the student's like, but I don't know what chapter it's in. She's like, how do you figure that out? They don't have textbooks in high school. They have e-readers, they have notes. They don't, a lot of students don't have textbooks in high school anymore.
Yeah, but then they should know how to use
Index
Google.
is.
They should know how to use
It's
Google.
right, like if you type entropy into Google.
Well,
You don't even have to click
That's
it.
true, but you may not have had.
It's on your phone.
Okay, so as instructors, we can help them by using the book in class. You know, model how you look things up. So, okay, we need a table on physical properties. Where are we going to find it? And then you pick up your book and you look it up. At each lecture, list the chapters or pages in the textbook that correspond to the material in the lecture so that they know where to go to review. Now, granted, it is in your syllabus, but it has been my experience that after the first day of class, nobody knows where their syllabus is, and they don't know how to find it on Canvas, and they don't know what's in there. Okay, so how do people typically read a textbook?
I look at the picture.